Charlie's mom.
I'm Lou, and I'm Charles' father.
I'm Charles' twin brother. My name's Angelo.
I'm Denzel, and I'm Charles' friend.
I was devastated. I cried in the hallway. The boys caught us, and we had to make up a lie because we weren't ready to tell them. I cried all the time. I was sent home sick from work. I was crying. I had a friend, Amy. I stopped at her house to pick up something from Scouts, and I must have looked a mess one day. She asked me what was going on. I just cried all the time.
Yeah, at first, when the doctor said, Charlie had, at first was diagnosed, I believe it was neuropathy. And I thought, okay, what do we got to do to get him better? How long will this take? Physical. Then he said, no, this is a permanent thing. Then I felt lost. I felt helpless. Like, oh my God. It improved to see how Charlie was improving and his dedication and his determination not to let it hold him down.
So I remember the first moment that we knew something was wrong. We were at, I forget what water park it was at, but we were at a water park, and there was like a slight concrete incline on the way up, and he just kept falling and falling and falling like 8 times in a row, and it was just clear that something was wrong. After that, it's scary. The doctors, you don't know what's wrong. At first they thought he might have some type of more severe muscular dystrophy, like one of the ones that degenerates your organs. So I think we were probably 12 or 13, maybe even younger, when he first got diagnosed. So it's scary. There's the threat of you don't know what's wrong. It could be something lethal. Your brother could be dead in 4 years. So it was definitely scary, especially being your twin. Your twins are closer than normal siblings usually. So
Life changed from getting through the day and putting things off to someday to we weren't sure Charlie was going to be able to walk eventually at that time, so we made things more urgent. I switched almost everything into how I can make things easier. I used my tax return to go out and buy a bike that was completely out of my price range, and I remember Charlie riding that bike with those same kids that he couldn't keep up with before. Everybody wanted to ride, all the parents were watching, and he was smiling. And I cashed in my retirement fund to get money, and we went to Disney to help cheer everybody up. Angelo, Charlie, we went top shelf. We stayed at the best resort. We stayed at this cool place, and Charlie could see animals outside the window. He saw other kids in wheelchairs, and I think it helped him understand that he wasn't the only one.
Life changes, like more doctor's appointments and things like that, yes, but his quality of life, although it was harder on Charlie, he still did basically the same things that he used to, other than like he couldn't play soccer or football anymore, but most things he could still do and did.
Yeah, there was. I feel like the whole wheelchair thing was a big change. There was a point where I spent a lot of time in a wheelchair, so going out in public, that was an issue. And I feel like also my parents tried to, they had this attitude where they're like, everything has to be fine, we have to lighten the mood. So we did a lot of stuff that we didn't necessarily want to do. I feel that they kind of forced us into doing. We were young, but we weren't young enough where we didn't know what was going on. So it's kind of weird, like in the diagnosis period, there was sort of this like attitude of me and Charles like pretending like, oh, this is so great, this is fun, when we're really like, we know why this is happening and we don't want to be there. So that was a weird thing to adjust with.
I've known Charles now for like 12 years, probably a little over 12 years. Charles and I met outside of some lockers one day, standing in front of the gym at our high school. I had just met some mutual friends of Charles's, and I was brought into the inner circle.
It's really not any different for me nowadays than having a other sibling. Charles is pretty independent, and his disability doesn't really hamper him now. He's like learned to live with it. But as when we were younger, there was small things that were different than having a normal sibling. Like he had to use a wheelchair in school, and he like when we went out in public, sometimes when we were walking, like say we went to the zoo, he'd have to use a wheelchair, and he really didn't want to or didn't think he needed to. You know, that used to like make him a little bit mad. He didn't want help and stuff like that.
My first impression of Charles was, oh man, there's two of them. Oh man, they're massive. Oh man, one of them clicks. Oh man, the one that clicks is Charles. After I got over the fact that Charles had braces, which was super quick, the main part that it affected was me telling other people to F off because, yeah, he's got braces on, but who cares? It was usually other people asking about the braces and other friends being like, hey, go away.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job of it. Like they would if Charles went to this camp every year. I forget the name of it. I don't think it was Sunshine Camp, but it might have been Sunshine Camp. But it was like a summer camp type thing, and they always made sure that I had a camp to go to too, so I didn't feel left out. When like Charles would do a lot of things, but I had a lot of sports stuff going on too, so I didn't feel like I was unfairly left out that way. I don't feel like there was a lot of stuff that Charles received that I didn't receive. Charles got a new bike, and I got a new bike too. Charles got a special bike that was kind of like one of those reclined bikes with 3 wheels, and they bought me a new bike too. So it's not, I didn't feel left out like that way or anything like that.
I don't really remember contacting the school around that time at all. It was a very difficult time. I have a lot of blank spots in the very beginning.
Well, I believe we just made a phone call to the office, the principal's office.
I remember many IEP meetings at the high school with the assistant principal and a state rep. The high school vice principal was very positive, always commenting on things that Charlie did well and that he was good at and excelling in. And then the state rep was very negative, always telling Charlie she didn't want him to do certain things, taking away certain privileges because she wasn't convinced he could do them. And I think it was a legal issue about we could sue the school if he got hurt, more so than what was good for Charlie.
I remember we had several meetings, a lot of paperwork, but a lot of good discussion.
The middle school, I remember being very positive and accommodating, letting Charlie use the elevator and have a friend take him places and finding ways that they could incorporate him into the mainstream population. The vice principal was very open to trying new things with Charlie, not so much the state rep.
Well, the biggest difference is the middle school required Charles to have a wheelchair and also I don't know what you would call it, like an assistant or somebody to be with him and help carry his books and push him in the wheelchair. That was the biggest difference.
I feel middle school, it was just weird because the school didn't know how to handle it. Like they were trying things to compensate for it, but it all felt like way too much. Like they were overcompensating, and Charles didn't want to. Like they gave him a monitor to walk around with him and make sure he got to class in time and carry his books and stuff, which he didn't need. They made him use a wheelchair, which he didn't need. They made him. They gave him like this keyboard thing. I think it was called an Alpha Smart, which he didn't need. So it felt, and I'm sure he felt this way too. Like they were trying to baby him a little bit. It almost felt like a liability thing where they're like, oh, well, we we got to do it this way because we can't have this become a problem for us. So that was really weird. High school, it wasn't really as bad. I feel like as we got older and as Charles started receiving treatment for his disease, he got a lot better and learned how to manage it a lot more. High school, there was really minor inconveniences, sort of like say we're walking to the park, we just got to walk slower for Charles, which wasn't a big deal. Like we're all going to the same place. I guess looking back on it, we were kids. It was the middle 2000s, so there wasn't a lot of like knowledge of how to be like respectful, I guess, to things like that. So like we used to call them cliques and things like that, which nowadays seems in very poor taste. But there was a lot of I guess light joking about his disease, which was kind of weird looking back, but in the time, I don't think it bothered him. It's just kind of something we did.
As far as cognitive disabilities goes, I feel like our school often isolated the kids with cognitive disabilities. I never interacted or saw the majority of the kids with cognitive disabilities in my school. There was one kid, he took it upon himself to be super active within the community. He was a part of sports teams. He was a pretty popular kid, but he took that upon himself. Everyone else was pretty much isolated unless they were pushing the snack cart, which then people often also didn't speak to them. They just threw money at them and they went back to their corner of the class.
Cognitive disabilities, not at all. Not at all. There was definitely a stigma around those kids. They pretty much, I don't even think they put a lot of kids with special needs in normal classes. They had their own room that they went to, and they pretty much had all of their classes in that one room. We had this thing called the snack cart. They had kids with mental disabilities, all levels, basically just make and prepare snacks for the rest of the kids, and then they like paraded them around on this little cart and sold them. All that did was develop this, a culture of the snack cart kids are coming, and I feel like that just excluded them more.
I was very aggressive when Charlie got sick in the beginning. I read up a lot and I asked a lot of questions. I was more of a pain in the ass than anything. So no, I never felt that at all.
I felt that way a few times, but we would ask questions and then they would explain them, and I felt better.
They did listen to Charlie's complaints and addressed all of them. The only controversy came when he wanted to do more, and there was usually back and forth on not letting him do that.
Charlie being with us at the meetings and like agreeing to things, and I know he did not want the wheelchair at all in the 6th grade, but he was forced to do that. But yeah, Charlie had input.
I think I went to a couple meetings, yeah, more in middle school. I don't think I went to any in high school, but I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. They kind of were trying to force all these things on Charles that he didn't feel he needed. I feel like even my parents a little bit were just kind of like going along with it because, the district officials were telling them this is what needs to be done, this is what we feel comfortable with. But no one was really listening to Charles. Like he didn't need a monitor. The wheelchair went away after 6th grade because he got his leg braces and can move around better, but didn't want to be in the wheelchair. He really didn't need it. So I feel like they kind of were just forcing things on him as almost like a liability thing.
Yes, I did fight for Charlie to have more rights in middle school, but privately I always second-guessed myself. I was always afraid I should be listening to the state rep, and that I was always worried that I was harming him. Charlie and I had very different views. I would have loved to coddle him where he did not want that. An example of that was a story he told me. In high school, he was walking through the halls and they were slippery and he fell. And the teachers and his friends were standing there and nobody helped him up, and he kept trying to get up and he kept falling. And I was horrified by this story. And he thought it was the best thing ever because they treated him like they would have treated everybody else. And there was always the yin and the yang of it. I wanted him to be able to fall and get up himself, but as a mother, I did not want that. So I fought for what he wanted and had to keep checking myself to make sure it was what he wanted.
I would say that everyone has a personality. Everyone, whether it be a cognitive or physical disability or even quote unquote mainstream, has a personality that you would either gel with or not. People with disabilities could either be really cool friends or they could also be jerks just like anyone else in the world. And I believe that people should just get along with people.
Get counseling. I can't stress enough how important counseling is.
Yeah, just make sure you make the calls that you need to make. Go to the doctor's appointments you need to make, and any questions you have, make sure you ask them. You have to understand what's going on, and that helps you feel better about the situation. Definitely find a service coordinator like we did with Access VR and Gina.
As far as advice goes, I guess realize that your sibling is a normal person too. If they need something, a lot of times, I know some cases they won't, but if they need something, they'll tell you. You don't have to baby them. A lot of times that makes it worse, I feel like. As far as getting through the diagnosis process, as a parent, you want to stay positive for your child and make it seem like, oh, everything is going to be all right, everything's going to be all right. Sometimes it's not what the person who's being diagnosed wants to hear. You know what I mean? They hear that all the time from the doctors, from their parents, from all the adults that are supervising the process because they want to make the child feel positive. And sometimes your sibling just needs a person to be like, wow, this is really scary. And you just be like, yeah, it is really scary. I'm scared too. Just kind of empathize with them on that. Listen to what they have to say. Don't be fake positive. Tell them how you actually feel, how it makes you feel, that you're worried about them, and listen to their worries and concerns too.
Hi, I am Charles, and I was and still am a student with a disability. So the thought process behind this project was I felt like I was in a unique position where I could arrange for multiple perspectives to be presented around my story. Every story has multiple perspectives associated with it. It affects everybody differently. Disability is no different. I felt that I was in a unique position to take ownership of my story and kind of create this project where we could hear from multiple point of views about what it's like to be a student with a disability. In the course of this project, you will have heard from my father, my mother, my twin brother, and my friend Denzel. My goal here is to kind of do a little debrief and talk about my perspective. So let's get into it. I guess we'll start at the beginning. My current diagnosis is CIDP, which is a degenerative nerve condition. This was not my original diagnosis. I've gone through extensive medical process and I've had a number of diagnoses along the way, and this is kind of the final one, hopefully, but it's the one we have right now. I was originally diagnosed in the summer of 5th grade leading into 6th grade when I started to have trouble walking on my own and I started to have hand tremors. Went through some extensive medical testing. We eventually came to the conclusion that I had Charcot-Marie tooth, which was the diagnosis was later overturned when I went to an adult neurologist. Around that initial diagnosis process, honestly, a lot of it is very hazy. Not only was I transitioning from, my life before disability to life with a disability, but I was transitioning from elementary school to middle school. Parents were recently divorced, so there was a lot of changes going on in my life around that time. As far as the initial diagnosis process, I don't remember that much about it. I remember that I hated the testing. I remember being very afraid of a lot of the tests. I remember especially the MRI and some of the nerve conduction tests that I had to do in a spinal tap. I was very afraid to do. And I remember having a lot of anxiety issues. I didn't get a solid diagnosis that I had anxiety issues until, much later on, until I was in college. But looking back, I can see how that anxiety started to present itself during this process. That initial diagnosis process is scary. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about it. You sit down and you have a conversation with a doctor and they tell you, to be honest with you, you might not live to see 30. That's hard to take. It's hard to deal with. So that was challenging. I think that going through it has made me a stronger person. It's made me more equipped to deal with hardships. And honestly, I think it's all worked out to be a net positive, because now in my life, might sound kind of, dark to say, but, now anytime something bad happens in my life, I can have that internal moment where I sit down and say, well, at least doctor's not telling me I'm only going to live to be 30. As for the education perspective, I helped conduct the interviews with my friends and family, and I watched back some of the tape, and I thought it was interesting how widely the perspectives varied, particularly around middle school, but around the IEP process and how well the school handled disability in general. Personally, I feel that the middle school did not do a good job handling my disability. If you listen to all the different perspectives, everyone has something that they say that kind of feeds into that narrative. And I think that was a big theme of going through the IEP process in the middle school. It was, my school was not equipped to deal with somebody who was in a wheelchair. And first of all, I didn't even need to be in a wheelchair. I would literally walk out of the car in the morning, get into a wheelchair, sit in a wheelchair all day. At the end of the school day, I would get out of the wheelchair and walk to football practice, where I didn't play football, but I would stand and I was a team manager because I still have friends in the football team and everything. So I would literally be on my feet all day, every day, except for those hours that I was in a wheelchair. And I did find, especially in middle school, that it was a little bit isolating. I was that kid in a wheelchair who had a monitor who followed me around constantly, a one-on-one aide. We went through several one-on-one supports. Many of them felt that it was their job to police my activity as well as be a support aide. It really caused me to struggle a little bit to create and maintain friendships, because it was like there's always this person hanging over you, and nobody wants to be the person joking with the kid in the hallway when there's an adult standing over their shoulder. And I think at that point in my life with a disability, I didn't have the self-advocacy skills to go into an IEP meeting and say, listen, I really do not need these things. This isn't to say that I didn't express my distaste, but what advocacy skills does a sixth grader realistically have? It should have been on the teachers and the middle school staff to listen to my perspective and understand that I was trying to advocate for myself. If it wasn't for my mom and my dad being my advocates, I would have had nobody. There was nobody standing up for me. My mom and my dad, I think that they, looking back, think they were a little bit more in control of the process than they were. That's not to say that they didn't do great jobs, because they were fantastic, and I would never be the person I am today without their assistance. Looking back, I remember times when they were overruled in the meetings. And I remember times where they were confused in the meetings because they didn't know terminology, and I didn't know the terminology that the teachers and the state reps were using. So that is the middle school aspect of it. When we transferred to high school, it was like night and day. The second we got into high school, we sat down with the VP and we had our first IEP meeting. I think his exact words were, there's absolutely no reason that you should be on an IEP. We need to move you to a 504 plan as soon as we can. Within the first 3 months of me being in high school, I was transferred to a 504 plan, because there was no reason that I should have been on an IEP plan. There just wasn't. I wasn't struggling academically at all. All of my needs were physical impairment and physical management needs. And after they took away the physical devices, at that point I had moved on to crutches. They were making me use these walking crutches. They took those away, they took away the monitor, and I thrived. I mean, I loved high school. I made many more friends. I participated in clubs and activities. I had girlfriends. I did everything that, I don't want to say a normal student, but I did everything that your average student would do. And I really attribute that to the fact that the VP of the school that I was working with and my IEP team allowed me to express myself and allowed me to advocate for myself and tell them what I needed. So my mom told a story about this one time that I slipped and fell. and it was my freshman year, and I was on the wrestling team. Mostly did manager type stuff with them. I loved wrestling. You know, I had some great wrestling coaches. They were fantastic influences in my life. I can't begin to say enough about my wrestling coaches and how much of a positive influence wrestling was in my life. But in this particular story, I was walking to a class with a couple of the older classmates, older wrestlers, and there was this metal grate, and I slipped and I fell on it, and I could not get up. And like it was hysterical. It was a funny situation. Like it wasn't a tragic, oh, this poor disabled child can't get up and needs immediate assistance. Like, it was funny. You know, I was falling. It was like I kept slipping. I was laughing. My friends were pointing and laughing at me. I told my mom that story, and I thought it was great, because that was the first time really in the course of my disability journey that an event caused by my disability had led to something that wasn't, oh no, this disabled person needs help. It was the first time that an event caused by my disability had led to inclusion rather than exclusion. So it was notable for me, and it was something that, you know, I still remember to this day, and I was surprised that my mom remembered that, but obviously she still did. As far as family life, I was honestly a little bit shocked that my brother said that he felt that things were even and fair growing up, because I felt that he did get excluded sometimes. Even if you listen to his testimony and you hear some of the things that, you know, my family describes, how like we went on a trip to Disney and that sort of stuff. I was the catalyst for all that. So they were responding to my needs, and they did a great job in, when they responded to my needs, making sure it was inclusive to everyone. So like Angelo came with us to Disney, obviously. When they bought me a bike, they bought Angelo a bike. It almost, I guess, in terms of responding to his needs, I feel like maybe my needs took precedence sometimes. He didn't feel that way, so, you know, I guess that's something for me to learn, because from my perspective, I thought that was happening, and from his perspective, it wasn't. So just like you want to listen and respect a disabled person's narrative of their own journey, I need to listen and respect to my brother's narrative of his journey. It was a learning experience for me as well. The final thing here I wanted to talk about is some advice for somebody out there who is a student with a disability right now. First of all, no matter how bad things seem right now, it's going to improve. If you're struggling with a disability, if you're recently diagnosed, or you are struggling to adapt to a diagnosis you have in the past, you'll find a way. We're humans. That's what we do. We overcome challenges. We find unique, creative solutions to problems. I know it seems tough because no one around you is experiencing the problems you do, so no one can help you create those solutions. Trust me, you will find a way. You'll find a way to create a solution for yourself. It's just human nature. I guess the best advice I can give is advocacy skills early. Everyone around you isn't always going to listen to your perspective as much as they should. That's a terrible thing, but it's just a reality you got to face. If I had the advocacy skills to negotiate my needs and negotiate my adaptions and express my needs when I was in middle school, who knows where I would be. The earlier that you can build the advocacy skills to somehow, some way make your will known, the better. Because sometimes you are going to have to come out kicking and screaming and just being a pain in the ass until you get what you need. The second piece of advice I would give you is, you know, there's a little bit of give and take with disability. If you want to get along with your peers and you want to fully integrate yourself into whatever culture you're in, and this isn't even just for people with disabilities, this goes with everyone. You need to make some adaptations, and you need to make some changes within yourself to fit the society that you're trying to fit into. For me, those changes took the form of finding humor in my own disability and in my own circumstances. That gave me a platform to, you know, relate to my peers, and we bonded over humor. Obviously, that's not going to work for everyone, but, you know, you have to be willing to make some changes to yourself as well as expecting others to change for you. As much as we would love to live in a perfect society, we're not there yet. Further along we get, that will become better and better, and society will become more and more disability friendly. But in the meantime, we have to fill a little bit of that distance ourselves. And I'm not saying compromise on everything, because that's a negative message and you shouldn't let anyone tell you that. Be nice to people. Little things. I hope that doesn't come off as condescending, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to say when I say that. Third thing is find yourself a service coordinator or somebody who knows what they're talking about, because there is absolutely no way that I ever could have gotten all the services I did and gotten all the college funding I did, and everything that happened to me in one way or another happened because I had a good relationship with a service coordinator. There's just no way. I mean, you're already dealing with your disability. You're dealing with your personal life. You're dealing with school. How are you supposed to, on top of all of those things, all the different laws, regulations, and agencies, doctor's appointments, all that stuff? It's impossible. So you just need to find help with it, especially when you're a student. And service coordinators and different organizations, in my experience, Access VR and MDA were the ones that helped me the most. Organizations are out there to help you utilize them. They're there for a reason. It'll make your life 10 times easier. You know, I'm studying right now to be a teacher. It's impossible for parents and students to navigate this world on their own. It just is. It's just impossible. Unless you go to school and you get a degree in special education, you're never going to know the ins and outs of the law like somebody who's been working in the field. As for building relationships and building success, it might sound corny, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Especially people with a disability, it's going to seem like life is keeping you down sometimes. And you just finding a way to stay positive is key. Finding a way to keep going and keep pushing through all these obstacles, headstrong, and just doing it. The first person that you approach to, ask out on a date or, ask to play video games with you might say no. The first 10 people might say no. But if you stop after 10, you're never going to find the one that says yes or the 10 that says yes. Personally, I think that's a product of the society we live in. But like I was talking about earlier, where we have to make changes within ourselves, this is one of those changes. We have to become persistent. We have to become durable, and we have to find ways to adapt to the society around us. We just have to be stronger than people who don't have a disability. It's okay to, sometimes be upset about the circumstance that you're in. Talk about disability as a social construct. Once you let your disability or your impairment get the better of you, you are disabling yourself. And you owe it to yourself to try your hardest, live life to the fullest. I myself have suffered with anxiety and depression. It's something I didn't deal with until much later on in my life because it was lost in all of the other medical stuff that's going on in my life. I mean, I have a doctor's appointment even now. I'm in relatively good health. And I go to the doctor probably 2-3 times a month for different things and different doctors, different specialists. So my mental health was something that always took a back seat. Eventually it caught up with me and it was like getting hit by a truck. The mental health was honestly, it was probably worse than any of the physical barriers I faced. It was almost as bad as when I was first diagnosed. It's still something that's difficult for me to talk about. I found ways to still be positive amidst everything and to still try my hardest throughout everything. And I think that's very important because as a person with a disability, the cards are already stacked against you. If you're not playing the hand that you're dealt with to the fullest, you're disabling yourself. The last thing that I can say is meet other people with disabilities and become immersed in disability culture. This is something that I did a little bit when I was in high school. I went to an MDA camp at Sunshine Campus and I met a lot of other people with disabilities. I made a lot of friends, heard a lot of different perspectives, and I learned a lot. I wish I had pushed it a little bit further, but I didn't until college. So hopefully this inspires anybody who's watching this to maybe start doing their research a little bit earlier. Doing some research into disability studies and disability activism and connecting yourself with those groups earlier is beneficial because it will improve your advocacy skills. It improves your interpersonal skills. It helps you find coping mechanisms. Before I talked about how the able-bodied people in your life aren't going to face your same challenges that you are. Well, here's a group of people who face the same challenges you do on a daily basis. So all of a sudden you're not trying to find solutions to these problems on your own. All of these things are invaluable to a person with a disability. And the sooner you get connected with these people in these groups, the better off it's going to be. And, even if it's something as simple as reading some articles on the social model of disability or reading some articles on the history of disability studies in America or special education in America. It's helped me a lot, and I wish that I had access to it sooner. That's it. I hope this project turned out to be useful. I hope someone out there watches this and resonates with something somebody said. I tried to structure it in a way that parents could watch it and get something out of it, friends could watch it and get something out of it, siblings could watch it. And I hope maybe something that I've said today, resonates with somebody out there who's currently a student with a disability, just trying to make it through high school or middle school. Thank you for watching, and best of luck out there. You know, do your best. Wake up every day with a smile on your face, and just keep doing you.